Welcome all of you to our first panel. Now we heard Jess's opening remarks. I think there could be no more apt opening to this leadership forum than to talk about women and climate change. We know that Los Angeles was home to one of the most devastating climate events in recent history, but also is really a bed of resilience, of innovation and creativity. What we're here to talk about is climate leadership and impact, and in particularly centering that conversation in the critical role of women. We know that women represent one of the most vulnerable communities to climate impacts, are responsible for generating resources in many parts of the world, and also are driving many of the solutions to climate change. And the leadership that we see on this panel is no more testament to that fact. At the same time, we're at such a critical moment. We've seen unprecedented momentum towards solutions, but also unprecedented resistance. And so I'd like for us to kick off our conversation by just setting the stage in terms of the moment that we are in right now. Can you share with us a little bit about your experience in terms of driving these solutions and what you see in particular are the biggest opportunities today? Gloria, I'd like to start with you. You have spent your career organizing in many places, but especially here in Los Angeles. And right here in LA, we also saw one of the most devastating impacts through the wildfires. Can you speak a little bit to the intersection of climate resilience and equity, in particular how frontline communities are being affected by climate impact, and what are some of the solutions that you've been able to promote and drive forward through your work?
Absolutely. So LA is my home, stomping grounds. This is where I organized, went to college, and bought my first home in Altadena. And I sold that home a few years ago, but I kept in touch with my community. And the reason for that is because Altadena is a special place. It was right by the mountains. My little Spanish bungalow, I call it the secret garden. I actually had a papaya tree, an orange tree, some grapes growing in the backyard, and it was just like a little property, but it was rich, rich soil, rich sense of community. I knew my neighbors. I was kind of the new booty on the street, where all my neighbors had been in their homes for like 30, 33 years, coming up to me like, you spent all that money on that house? I bought this house for $100,000. I'm like, that's great. I'm so happy for you, And when you fast forward to today, those were some of the best neighbors that I've ever had, and I kept in touch even though I moved. And Tuesday night, when the fires struck those homes, they called me. And they said, Gloria, the homes are burning. And I saw in real time a neighborhood that I once called home turn to complete rubble. Our entire block, the surrounding block, decimated, completely gone, and unrecognizable. So when I tell you the empathy that I felt at the onset of this year, the weight of it, and the tears that I shed, it was so heavy. And to know that I know of at least 50 families in Los Angeles that lost their homes and now are trying to rebuild, because the reality is that in times like this, there's a lot of predators out there who like to swoop in and buy up property and turn it into a place that's unrecognizable to the people that lived there before and actually push those people out. And so communities are coming together because that's what we do in LA, is support each other, show up for each other. And even that night of the fires, that's who I saw were neighbors coming out in their trucks with buckets of water, trying to help each other. That's the spirit, is the sense of community, real love and mutual support and showing up for each other. And that's what they're taking to the future, is like, how do we rebuild in a way that's about us and it's about our vision and not someone else pushing us out. So when I think of the work that I do, I run the Solutions Project, and we resource organizing, power building, and we do this in communities that are disproportionately impacted, the communities that are most impacted. And in the US, that tends to look like Black folks, Indigenous folks, Latin, Asian and Pacific Islander communities, and other communities of color. And that's where we have to start, because those are typically the communities that are left out. So I fundraise at the Solutions Project, and we move money quickly to communities that are most in need, who are advancing climate solutions, to turn this story around. And we help to amplify their stories so that they can tell their stories from their perspective and share a vision that touches others. And we build bridges, because right now, in a time where there's so much fear and division being sown, we have to work together. And people say that this is a feminist approach to leadership, because in our society, we're told to be divided, to be competitive, to not collaborate. And they say that feminine leadership is all about collaboration and looking out for each other, moving with a sense of love, understanding that we are interdependent. And as women, the other thing that we don't talk about often is spirit and faith. And that is something that I think gets us through any moment. And right now, it's definitely going to get us through this moment. And I'll pause here.
Yeah, what a wonderful, wonderful way to kick off this conversation, Gloria. And in particular, I'd love to pick up on something that you mentioned, which is resourcing. And in particular, a lot of the solutions that you spoke to are dependent on fundraising and being able to deploy large amounts of capital. So, Kara, you run a sustainability program at one of the largest corporations in the world. I think what's really unique about your work is that you're able to leverage both breadth and depth. There's probably no sector that Amazon doesn't touch, but you've also designed your program to be able to deploy capital to frontline and local communities. Can you speak a little bit about how you leverage both of those elements to be able to promote these and accelerate these solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. And following on Gloria's sentiment, I think we care deeply about the communities where we operate, and for Amazon, that does mean every community basically in the United States almost. We certainly have customers there. We have operations in most of those places. In California, we have tens of thousands of employees, and we have been here for a very long time. And so one of the things that we started doing, one of the superpowers we have is fulfillment and logistics. And so we thought, a number of years ago, that we could be contributing on disaster relief. And as these events are happening with more frequency and more intensity, as we know around the world, one of the things we not only want to do is to be there for our communities with goods and services, but to also help with the logistics and the deployment, and then think about that in some, increasingly sustainable ways, because you want to do that in a way which doesn't leave a lot of waste behind. You want to do that in a way which gets fresh food to people quickly, which also understands and works with organizations that are on the ground and of the community, so that we work with people who know what the needs of the community are and don't supersede that or suppose that somebody knows better. Because I think the community always knows best. They always know what their needs are, and the first thing you need to do is to listen deeply to that. But I think being prepared is also key to that. So we've done a number of things. Certainly for the devastating LA fires, we donated $10 million, and we donated over 500,000 specific products and goods and things like that, which are important. But one of the things that we really have been increasingly obsessed with is preparedness. So again, for disaster relief, we've created these disaster relief hubs around the world. And we actually started here with one in San Bernardino, where we stock supplies. Because one of the first things you need to do is get supplies to the first responders. So getting masks to them, taking care of them with their needs, and making sure they have what they need first as they're going in and responding to these events in real time. And so we have now 15 of these hubs. We just launched, I was in Mexico City a couple weeks ago. We just launched our last one in Mexico City. And these are hubs that we take part of our warehouse and our fulfillment. We create kits. They are ready to go so that immediately we can respond. And we have these kits ready to go in communities, and they're stocked with first aid supplies and with masks and with air filters and things that will be necessary in the moment. And unfortunately, we know these events are going to happen, but I think being prepared and being resilient and thinking about that. And I'd love to talk about all the ways and climate intersects, and that we're working on that as well. But for this issue in particular, I think both the resilience and the preparedness are a very key point of that.
Yeah. And can you speak briefly to this also not just being the right thing to do, but also good business?
Well, I think, in any community where we operate, you want it to be a healthy, vibrant community. So, from a sustainability perspective, we want to think really about, getting back to sort of the intersectionality between justice issues and climate issues, and particularly women. We look through all of those lenses. And so I think, looking at, for example, if my team is looking at, where is their air pollution? Can we deploy, as we electrify our fleet, we have a commitment to be net zero carbon by 2040. That is huge across our global operations. We are the largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy in the world and have been for the last 5 years. One of the other things we're doing is electrifying fleet. When you electrify fleet in an area, that's going to clean the air. You're going to have fewer cars on the road, and you're going to, have less pollution. Can we do that in the places where, communities are already affected by air quality and where you're seeing asthma rates rise and you're seeing people being affected? So you want to look at these issues from intersectionality. I think there's also a really fascinating thing around women have a lot of the amazing solutions in their communities for climate, but yet don't receive as much of the funding. So, we have a climate pledge fund. We deploy $2 billion to early stage decarbonizing solutions. We've made 30 investments so far, and a number of those are by amazing women-led companies like Genesis and Pebble, and companies that are doing creative, interesting things where, again, women are taking the lead, and you want to make sure that the funding is getting to them.
Thank you, Kara. And Nomzamo, your activism spans the globe. Can you speak to us about how your advocacy and your work, in particular with frontline communities in the global South, what are ways that we can create more inclusive conversations so that no communities are left behind, especially as we think globally?
Thank you for that question. Morning, everyone. I think it's important for us to understand that there are solutions, that there are women on the African continent, young girls, who are coming up with the most durable, scalable, incredible solutions. All they need is funding. Mm-hmm. It really just is. It boils down to that. Do you believe in the solution, and do you believe in actually putting your money where your mouth is? Seeding is absolutely important. I think in my work with the Earthshot Prize as an ambassador is really to find those incredible African innovators and partner them with global companies and global philanthropists, people who are able to put their money towards something that's actually going to be able to be scalable. I think there's also a very big mistake that we think when we look at the African continent, there's a nobility, a charitability element to it. It's not. It's business. There's an economy there. A very, very successful, very rich in investment, but also there's incredible potential as well. So outside of the Earthshot Prize and really advocating for African innovators to be able to access those kinds of funding where we are able to use global networks so that they can be able to tap into that, I also work as a refugee a goodwill ambassador for the refugee agency at the UN. And what I found is that when women are displaced, the power of just the ability to overcome, the power to rebuild. You go into the refugee communities and you see women who are raising crop, and selling it to the communities as well. And that's when you realize that truly, and I think for me what's most important is that there's a huge gap when it comes to what's happening internationally and what's happening on the African continent and how to be that bridge. And for me, I found a very niche thing of convincing brands to put their money somewhere good. And I use that very, very well because I think it's important that if a brand wants to work with me as a spokesperson or as a brand ambassador to sell their product, they should be able to also believe in what I believe in. And I believe in not being the only one to make it out. I believe in really just throwing out the net and saying these are the ways that you can be able to partner with local communities. Again, local communities know how to use the money. I mean, we have a huge mining community back home, and miners come back, they get paid, and guess what they do? They take their wages, they put it in their wife's hand, and they say, you know best what to do with it. And they sure do.
That's incredible, Nomzamo. So you use your platform as leverage.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, I also have many, many hats. I also have my own nonprofit, which is the Nomzamo Lighthouse Foundation. And for 5 years now, we started the Empowering Her event. It started off as raising funds. It was me reaching out to all the brands that I work with and to say that I want to raise funds for women-led businesses, women who operate in communities that are vulnerable, communities that are marginalized, and how can I be able to raise money for those businesses? Because if those businesses don't make it out of COVID, communities are affected. And if communities are affected, there's a ripple effect that just goes way, way, way beyond anything that we can be able to control. So it's the scalability of the solutions, but also finding creative ways of tapping into your networks to actually take the money and go into the communities and plant it there. We also have schools around Guamashu, which is a community that I grew up in. It's a township. And so in Guamashu, we have schools there, and there's nutrition kitchens. The nutrition kitchens are not only food for the kids that go there, but also we go out into the communities, and women are able to come to the nutrition kitchen and learn how to make healthy food, learn how to grow from the land.
Yeah, and this is so inspiring. So Sophia, I'd like to then turn to you in terms of how do we frame these solutions in the right way? How do we reach vast and diverse audiences when so much of the narrative around climate action seems to be this is a sacrifice, this is the right thing to do, it's gonna cost me, but I actually need to take care of my family? How do we use storytelling, and how do we use our platforms to reframe climate action as good business, as a good economic decision, rather than just the moral high ground?
Well, I think one of the first things we have to do is address the misinformation and disinformation that we're up against. And when you see how vicious and overwhelming it's become, when entire global media conglomerates are purchased by the oligarchy to convince us that we are each other's enemies instead of each other's allies, it's because messaging is effective. And whether you're talking about education, whether we're talking about corporate social responsibility to be the largest global purchaser of green energy, as you said, great fact. I'm only acknowledging that because I've clearly also criticized Amazon online a lot. So hey, I appreciate that. We have to do both. And I do mean that. I think it really, some caused by corporations, some caused by global markets, some caused by divesting in education or denying education, by the opportunity deserts that we've created, which really is a global opportunity apartheid in certain communities. These aren't conversations that are necessarily as sexy or sticky as what happened on White Lotus on Sunday, or what so-and-so from whatever show you like to watch is, doing that was insane. So what I think we have to do, and one of the privileges of my life as a storyteller, is figure out how to use our platforms. And if some of these conversations about markets and oppression and data around women feel overwhelming to people, how do we do the communication? How do we begin to translate those things and take it out of the realm of seeming so political that it's for someone else, and really make clear to people that this is deeply personal, that everything we experience in our lives is the direct result of policy. And if people like us on this stage are not in the rooms where policies are being made, those policies will not include people like us. And it's not an accident, I don't think, that you are in charge of sustainability at such a large corporation. It is undeniable that the incredible results of your organizations are what they are, and that you've built the trust in your local communities and global communities because you represent people when you walk in the room. And I believe it's part of my duty, kind of, straddling the line. Like, I got the white privilege on the one side, but that's an illusion because being a woman is being a woman in the world. Who do I carry into rooms with me? And if I look around a room, when I started going to conferences before they were cool and chic like this, they certainly didn't have great lighting. Thank you to the crew here. Really appreciate it. I was often the only woman in the room. And so how do you begin to change that? Who do you demand to bring with you or you refuse attendance? How do you ask questions, whether at the 5 people on stage level or at a global level, about who's included, whose opinions matter, and who's really contributing their ideas and experiences, the genius of their diversity to the solutions that we're setting? Because the internet, the quick refresh on the phone, it's fast, it's immediate. Climate solutions, solutions for women and people of color around the world, solutions for refugee communities, they require longevity. But longevity, I think, is sexy in another way. It's the longest friendship in your life. It's the longest relationship in your life. And so if you can fall in love with your ability to be an activist, with your ability to speak and be in relationship with your community, I think that's a story that has power in the world.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, Sophia. And Gloria, can you reflect on that? Can you round us out on storytelling in terms of how you also use your organization, the way that you platform people, and the way that you're able to mobilize philanthropy around these solutions?
Absolutely. So right now I think about women and how we're the backbone of our homes, our churches and religious and spiritual institutions, our schools, our communities. And I think about how we are also disproportionately impacted when it comes to climate. And they actually say that climate is a threat multiplier for women. Whether that is, it exacerbates economic insecurity. It increases the risk of gender-based violence. It affects our health, especially when it comes to mothers and newborns. And yet and still we persist and have a vision for how to change this. And we recognize that this work is deeply intersectional. That's actually what drew me to the climate space. It's deeply inclusive. It's deeply non-binary. It's all the things, the directions that we need to start moving towards. It's not about commodifying people in the places that we call home, which means just putting a price tag on everything and extracting all the goodness out of it and draining it of its resources. But it's instead about how do you be regenerative? How are you demonstrating that we're working together to protect our land and the places that we call home and to look out for each other? Because that's the world that we need to build right now. Authoritarianism is on the rise globally, and we can see that we're not immune to that here. And it means that we have to move in a different way. We have to be in a different relationship with each other and this land. And that's the powerful thing about the climate justice movement. And it's those kinds of stories, like we talk to communities that are on the ground affecting change, because the reality is that, we've lived through witnessing the murder of George Floyd, a racial reckoning, COVID, and a global pandemic. The climate crisis, that's apocalyptic, right? Every time you see what climate can do to any places. And that's taking a toll on people. So when you talk to communities that are most impacted and ask them to share their personal stories, because that's going to connect to their neighbors, that's going to connect to someone who may be in a completely different area on this continent or another part of the world. And when you ask them to share their vision, that's the piece that I think lands, because that's what we need to be listening to from each other, doing that collectively, and that's what our decision makers need to be listening to. And one of the first lessons that I learned as an organizer from the grassroots community is that the conditions that we're living with, the problems that we're living with is not happenstance, but it's the result of people in a room like us making decisions about our lives. And either we can show up and be a part of it and help to actually shape the outcome of our life, or you sit on the side and you're just kind of complaining and reaping the consequences anyway. So it's a new moment that we're in that's requiring leadership, it's requiring vision, it's requiring compassion for each other, it's requiring us to be inclusive and not so divided. This is kind of the call that people on the ground are asking us to do, and we just help to amplify those stories. We put them in front of the right journalist, in front of the right person, high net worth individual who has some resources, in front of the right private philanthropist, so that their stories and their solutions, most importantly, can be resourced. Because right now, people are, after everything that I just named, people are shying away from giving, and this is actually when we need to be leaning in and giving. This is when we need to show up for each other, not back away, and we need to be courageous.
Thank you. Thank
I
you
wanted
for
to
saying
add that
Gloria.
on that, Gloria. Before we run out of time. I live by two mottos. The first one is I want to leave my generation better than I found it.
Yes.
And that's a call to action to self. And every time I say it, I know that it's a provocation to everybody else who takes it and it sticks to them. The second one is to lift the lid of invisibility. What is invisible? What is invisible to humanity? What is invisible to women leadership? Are you willing to lift that lid of invisibility? And the one that I really, really, really live by is Issa Rae. She once said, we're so fixated with the idea of collaborating up instead of collaborating across. And I hope this room cross-pollinates and that you're going to be collaborating across.
What a wonderful note. We have just a brief minute or two left, and so I think we all could use a little bit of hope right now, and that was testament to exactly the role of women leadership and what we can learn from each other. But Kara, can you tell us what we should be hopeful about, or what is your appeal? What is an opportunity that you see on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo all of this. I love this. I would also say that, it's the old adage of do not let perfection be the enemy of progress. Yeah. There is so much going on in the climate space that is incredibly hopeful. There are amazing new technologies. We are running fast at creating new concrete, new steel, mass timber. We just put up a net zero arena with partners in Seattle that is phenomenal. I mean, 17,000 seats and no fossil fuels and zero waste. And these things can be done. I'm at Amazon because I want to use our scale and our size to demonstrate they can be done in mass, right, at that scale. And I think that women are okay with, we contain multitudes, right? We're okay with seeing that we just push through, as you said. And we've never decarbonized the global economy before. We're gonna make mistakes. There are going to be things that don't work. And so I think just keeping at it, keeping going, the solutions are there. We need to hold each other to account. We need to hold each other to fund them. We need to seek out women who have the solutions, and we can do this. So I am optimistic. I think, though, we need to just keep pushing.
Wonderful. Sophia, last word to you.
Something I'd like to add, because these are big conversations, right? To decarbonize the global economy, to figure out how to build better community. And, if like me, the last 30 days have felt like the longest 10 years of your lives, here we are together. One thing I think is incredibly powerful is to call your representatives. It is the easiest thing you can do. There's a great website called 5calls.org. It'll give you a script. It'll take 5 minutes. And the reason I say that is people who don't want us to find climate solutions, people who don't want to decarbonize the economy, tend to call the representatives in this country at a rate of 11 to 1 of us. So if you want to work toward a solution, if you want our education system to be funded, if you want women to have opportunities, if you know that every person in this room benefits from a DE&I policy, we got to start calling our representatives more often. We do this, but we don't do the simple thing as often as we should. So that would be the greatest simple line to hope I could offer.
I took so much from this conversation. We all have power. We have agency. We know that we need to get investment to the right places. We have the mechanisms, we have the solutions, we have so much to be hopeful for, and I think your leadership is testament to that. Thank you for being here with us.